East Asian geography. So we're going to talk about the material from chapter 1 and here. The first section deals with learning about the landforms and water bodies found in East Asia, and also finding out where most people in East Asia live. So when you see the landforms and water bodies, this is East Asia has many elevated areas, including mountains and plateaus and highlands. If you look over here, you see the Tibet over here, and then there's the Himalaya mountains. And just this area over here is overall here is raised. There's a desert up here. There's some plains like this region here, the East China Plain, and we're going to get to that in a bit. Some rivers, but for the most part, a lot of it, not a lot of people live in some areas. Himalayas are the tallest set of mountains in the world, and they were created when the Indian subcontinent collided with the rest of Asia. And if you look here, there's an example, there's an image of how it actually happened. And this is over millions and millions of years. So that is a long-term collision that still is having impacts today, because the Himalaya mountains are still growing a couple inches a year. So in terms of islands, there's quite a few islands. The most prominent ones are the Japanese islands. They're made from volcanoes that rose up from the ocean floor. And Japan is still very geologically active, and things like volcanoes and tsunamis like the one last year happen pretty regularly, unfortunately. And that has a major impact on their economy and the way people live their lives there. Now, China has more than 1 billion people. It's a very old civilization, and much of China, though, is desert or mountain or plateau where not a lot of people live. There's two main rivers, the Wanghe and the Chang or the Yangtze. It depends on how it's written. It's written as Wang and Chang in the book. But they both flow through the East China Plain. This area is very fertile, and most people live in this area in China. Now, Japan is an island nation. It's an archipelago with thousands of islands. Most people live in cities along the coast where there is some flat land. Most of it is very mountainous, though. There's 4 main islands: Hokkaido, Kyushu, Honshu, and Shikoku. And most of the people live on Honshu. Korea's 2 countries, 1 peninsula. Now, Korea sticks out into the Pacific, and Korea is divided into 2 countries, north and south. Population in East Asia, the population is spread unevenly. Some areas have high population density. The land that's flat needs to be shared by farmers, factories, and cities. So obviously it's a lot easier to build on flat land. Now, the second section is dealing with climate and vegetation, and it examines the major climate regions in East Asia, and we'll talk about learn how to discover about how the climate affects people and vegetation in East Asia as well. Now, East Asia's climate regions, most of East Asia are in the following climate regions: semi-arid, that's in this map, it's the steppe area up here. Then arid, which is the desert region, again, over here. And then you have humid subtropical. Humid subtropical is down here. And then humid continental, which is up here a bit. And then we have highland climate, and highland climate is over here. And so there's some other little areas like tropical rainforest down here, and then subarctic, but for the most part, it's those 5, I believe it is. So there's a variety of climates. Most of East China is in humid subtropical, which means there are cool winters and hot summers and lots of rain. Humid continental means that there are warm summers and cold winters. Other parts of China areas are more arid and cold. And Japan and the Koreas are generally warmer due to being close to the ocean. One really important factor, not only for East Asia, but also for South Asia and some other parts of Asia as well, Southeast Asia as well, are the monsoons. Monsoons are winds that regularly change with the seasons, and they have a major impact on weather. When blowing west, they tend to be cold because it goes over this region here, that there isn't any moisture, and it's cold because it's high up. And so there's not a lot of moisture when it goes this way. And then when they blow from the south, that's when you get a lot of moisture, and that's when you get the rainy season. Typhoons are major storm systems like hurricanes. It's just what they call them, typhoons, and when you're talking about the Pacific, and they can cause a lot of devastation and death, and unfortunately that happens in some places. The influence of climate. Climate greatly impacts what people can grow and and eat, and how they harvest their crops. This is an example of a rice paddy. Climate greatly affects vegetation in East Asia. Many of the plants have evolved to live in the changing climate. Bamboo, if you look in the background behind the pandas, that's bamboo. It grows fast in the wet season, then it sort of stops growing and reserves its energy during the drier season. Deciduous trees are trees like in the United States that lose their leaves in the fall and come up with beautiful colored leaves in autumn there, and then what ends up happening is that allows them to not need as much moisture, and so they through the winter. How climate affects people in East Asia. The Wang-He River, it's very important for spreading rich soil that's easily farmed. And this here is, it's also known as the Yellow River. You can tell that it's kind of orange, but they called it the Yellow River. It sometimes floods and its cause is devastation. Its nickname also is China's sorrow because of when it floods seriously, there's lots and lots of problems. When it doesn't rain enough, there's lots and lots of problems. In the north, they generally grow wheat, and in the south, they grow rice. That's why you get the noodle cuisine in the north and the rice cuisine in the south. The last section here, objectives, section 3, natural resources and land use. We're going to learn about East Asia's major natural resources and find out how people of East Asia used land to produce food. Now, there's a lot of resources in the region. Countries rely on coal, oil, and water for power, for hydroelectricity, and fertile land is important, and they also use the bodies of water pretty effectively. One area where there's an interesting mix is mineral resources in two Koreas. There's an uneven distribution of the resources. Some have a lot, some don't have much at all, but North Korea has a lot of coal and iron, and that would be great for South Korea to use, but they're still at war, so they can't really get along that way. South Korea is what is called a developed country. That's a country that has a lot of industry, and North Korea is one that's a developing country that really does not have much in the way of industry and still working to get there. Mineral resources of Japan. Now, Japan has very few mineral resources. It has had lots of economic success, but like South Korea, has needed to import many of its raw materials in. Mineral resources in China. China has a lot of resources. Has the most resources in the region. Has a lot of coal and things like that, but it even still needs to import oil, and that ends up being it's actually competing in the world market more and more, and that's causing gas prices and oil prices to rise. Water for energy production. There's some swift-flowing rivers in China and Japan, and they can use those for hydroelectric dams to create a lot of power. The most famous one right now is the Three Gorges Dam, and also dams can provide some flood control as well. Now, this is an example of aquaculture. This is where they've fish farms and other farms, like actually shrimp farms and things like that, where they basically have flooded an area and then they've used it as a farm for fish, just an area where they can go ahead and grow them. And it's a way of hedging against the problems in the environment out in the ocean, because depleted stocks of fish due to overfishing and pollution have made it so that fish are very valuable, and so this is one way to actually control it and make sure you have enough food. So a lot more food to be made overall. Now, using land to produce food, it's very important to use all the fertile land possible, because not a lot of it is actually useful for farming. And 14% in China, 12% in Japan, 14% in North Korea, and 19% in South Korea, and that's about the same as in the United States for 19% used effectively for farming. Now, terrace farming, you get the idea if there's a hill here, and they've cut into the actual side of the hill and made flat areas where they could actually grow things, and then they flood the fields. It's a way of getting more land to farm. And then another way is to go ahead and do double cropping, which is you plant two sets of crops, and then they mature at different times, and then you have food, a steady amount of food. And that's it.